Folks, welcome back to another episode of Sports Talk Spotlight. I am very excited for my next guest. You know him as Cage Lawyer. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. Born in Brooklyn, New York. That's my hometown actually as well.
There you go. Born in Brooklyn. Grew up, went to high school in Staten Island, law school in Queens, and I live in Long Island now. So all New York. Went to college in New York.
Nice.
Been here for a long time. Hopefully, I get to stay here a little longer.
That's awesome, man. No, so you've been in the hobby for a long time. Like you said, you've been doing content for a long time. Your podcast, you do it on a daily basis. For people who aren't familiar with your podcast, I just recently actually found it. The reason I found you was on Instagram. I started following some of your content there, learned about the podcast, started listening to that. So tell people what they can hear on a daily basis on your podcast.
Yeah, sure. So the podcast itself, it's an interesting thing, man. I mean, I'm gonna be 48 years old this year, and if you go back maybe 5 years, I wouldn't even know what a podcast was. As a matter of fact, during COVID, I was in an IG group talking to hobby folks. Probably a lot of names from the hobby, and telling stories about the cards I used to buy as a kid. Someone would put a picture of a card up and say, "What do you think about this?" And I'd say, "Okay, well, what about this one instead? Did you know that they made this 3 years before that? It's kind of cool looking, and it's less pop, and it might be a better buy for your money." And without fail, the comment was always, "You got to do a podcast." One person in that group, his name was Andrew Goldberg. He was like, "I'm just gonna send you a Zoom link and we're gonna start talking." And we did that in July of 2020, and for 3 years, from July 2020 until April 2023, every single day. The hobby's different. The hobby was different in 2020 than 21, 22, 23, you name it. I now do a bunch of content. I do on every Tuesday, I have what's called a hobby news. It's a news minute. You guys can check that out on Instagram. It's a fun little segment, just sort of like a recap of what's happened, in the hobby that week, auction records, Aoki throwing cake in people's faces. What's Jeff Wilson doing now that's got everybody riled up? And, a little humor involved in it. I put the suit and tie on, make it look like I'm a news anchor. Fridays, I put out what's called Cage 6 instead of Page 6. It's like a rumor thing now. That's a new piece of content. Also kind of like a quick 1 minute quick hitter of, what I'm hearing in the hobby.
You're the TMZ of the hobby, right?
Start to do that. You just have some fun with it, right? And, I do episodes Mondays and Wednesdays now under the banner of The Hobby with Cage. Just solo stuff. I try to have guests on and stuff. And, now I try when folks ask, to do podcasts for them. I haven't really done that many. I posted last week that I did one with, the Hobby Daily News. I
was just on there actually.
See, and I posted that I was on, and I'm like, all you gotta do is ask. But people are afraid to have me on; they don't ask.
Well, you're I've been asked a bunch of times. They might be a little intimidated by you, I mean,
I was like, all right, you just ask. So you asked. You asked yesterday. I did. And I'm like, I have to have a cancellation. Send it in this window, and boom, So I mean, sometimes
that's just so how it happens, man. But yeah, it was just kind of a spur of the moment thing. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna reach out to Cage. I shot you a message, and you're like, as it happens, I'm free tomorrow, and I'm like, all right,
in this hour. If you could do that hour, we're good.
We're good to go, man. So speaking of content creation, right? Like you said, you have a couple different avenues that you create on your Instagram page. On your, do you have a YouTube page as well?
YouTube, The Hobby with Cage.
Okay, excellent. So that's what I look forward to every week is the Hobby Minute, the hobby, weekly hobby updates. So you focus mostly on a lot of the content creators out there, right? So you're obviously a content creator yourself. I want to ask you, what do you think content-wise the hobby needs more of, and what do you think the hobby needs less of?
Sure. I mean, what's funny is, it's a great question. I think the answer is going to be an interesting way of me circumventing the question. The hobby needs whatever it wants, right? There are a lot more people involved and engaged in this hobby than you probably realize. And with that, it's like when you turn a television on, right? There's sports, there's drama, there's soap operas, there's whodunits and crime mysteries, there's Dateline movies, there's Hallmark Channel. There's literally something for everybody, and there's enough people out there who watch it all. Now, you may have a different taste than me, right? I don't want to watch those Hallmark movies. They make me feel too good about myself. I want a crime mystery. I want a drama. I want a whodunit.
Okay.
It's the same thing with this, like it is with everything else, right? So, what I would tell you as far as hobby content, there's something for everybody. There's enough stuff out there for everybody. Sometimes I think there's too much.
Mhm.
Um, there were people who would answer that question pretty easily, and they probably call themselves hobby purists, and they would say, "We need more content about the cards. We just need people putting card content up there." And to that, I'll say, sure, if that's what you want to show off, great. I do that every now and again, almost bowing to that. I don't want to
Yeah.
call it criticism, right? Because I try to be funny. I try to be witty. I try to provide some value. I try not to put content out there just for the sake of putting out content. I try
Right.
to do an episode when I have something to talk about, something to share, that's going on in my own hobby journey that I think other people might also be experiencing and they
Mhm.
might gain something from it. Same thing with the videos. Sometimes it's just to make people laugh, but there's value in that also, right? I do put content out that's just the cards. As a matter of fact, you go to my page, I put like a card this week, and I was like, sometimes the card itself is the content.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool content, my least watched video, like my least clicked on, least interacted with
That's
piece of content.
that's always how it happens for me. Whenever I put something out there that I spend a lot of time on, and I'm thinking like this is going to be a nice one, it's like you get the minimum amount of stuff, and you're like, damn, like.
Yeah, I
But
mean, so
sometimes you just do a throwaway thing and it blows up, so you never know.
yeah, I mean, honestly, if just to have an answer instead of deflecting, I think what we could use is a little more education about the cards themselves as they come out.
Mhm,
I don't have the time to do this myself, but like if I had all the time in the world or are starting sort of like a hobby content business, here's a free idea to anybody listening. Um, there are some websites that do a decent job of this, and there are definitely some breakers who do it, probably in connection with the companies that are giving them cards. There are people who kind of open up packs of cards and like, here's a preview.
mhm,
This week, Topps Destiny comes out. Here's a box. Let me show you what the cards look like. You name it, the whole deal. And there are websites that have kind of like checklists, and there are people who say, hey, here's the chase. I think it would be kind of cool if there was somebody who, like, once a week said, okay, here's the release calendar. And by the way, here's a checklist. Here's a this. Here's what you get out of this box. Here's the chase cards. Here's kind of like the pack odds. Here's, what you can expect out of it, the whole deal. That would be kind of a cool thing that I don't think anybody really does.
mhm,
Um, you know, and that would be one. Two, um, content that focuses on the card but tells a story about the card. Find your trove. Frank does a very good job of kind of telling
mhm,
stories about like sports.
yeah,
Oh, Will Chamberlain when he scored 100, did you know this, this, and this? But like for example, I got a PSA order back today. It's not what you think, but I got like this. So if I just posted this, it's a Type 1 photo. If I just posted that, I get some likes. I get some, whatever the whole deal. I would like to make a video about it, which
mhm,
people aren't going to care about because it's black and white and it's a Ted Williams and blah blah blah. But you see, this is Ted Williams in 1944.
yeah,
If you're a Red Sox fan, that jersey looks weird to you because you're like, Ted Williams played for the Red Sox his entire career, but I don't recognize that jersey. And the reason why is because it's a Navy jersey. He's playing baseball for the U.S. Navy. And
that's
this is a
pretty
Type
cool.
1 photo, 1944, when he took a break from baseball, from Major League Baseball, to go and be a fighter pilot in the
Yeah,
war. He also played for the Navy baseball team. And that's one of the few photographs of him that were taken in 1944 of him wearing the Navy. Like, stuff like that. That's a cool thing. It's a cool look, but you got to actually add some kind of like education, some evergreen, some fun to it.
that's
But I
kind of
have a
what I
feeling if I did that, no one would watch it.
no, you'd be good at that stuff, man. You're a good storyteller, and that's kind of what I gravitate towards as well. Is the story behind people's collections, right? Maybe not necessarily the story behind the item, but there's always a story behind every collector and every item that they get. That's what I enjoy. That's what got us all into the hobby, and that's kind of the fondest memories of why people collect is because you remember where you got that specific item, who you were with, how you received it, what shop it was at. Like there's always those core memories surrounding collecting. So can you tell me what are some of your core memories from when you started collecting?
Sure. Um, I remember hand collating a 1985 top set, 792 cards by opening packs of it, buying cards at the store, buying cards at the show, and it was easy to get the Roger Clemens. It was easy to get the Dwight Gooden because people had those, and you paid enough for it, you get it. But I remember, buying card magazines and making phone calls to stores in Wisconsin looking for commons to put the card together. And I remember the 792nd card that I bought was Len Sakata, a Baltimore Oriole player that no one has ever heard of, but that was the card that I needed to
The
complete my
chase card,
85
yeah,
top. That was my chase card at the time because there were no chase cards.
right.
Um, I remember being a kid in Staten Island, with 8 other kids on my block and the block next to us, hopping on our bikes, I didn't have a mongoose or anything fancy, but some of the kids did, Diamondbacks and all that
Mongooses
stuff.
those were
Riding,
solid, right?
yeah, ride 3, 4 blocks to the, to the store and buy packs of cards and, try to open up those 87 tops packs and maybe hit a McGuire with the wood border, or if you were lucky, a future star Bo Jackson or the Conseco with the cup. Like I have those. As I grew up collecting cards and trading cards, and it became a bigger business, and we went through the same type of boom cycle that we're going through now in the late 80s and early 90s. The more cards coming in, more card shows, you name it. My father, who had cards as a kid thrown out, you name it, was a Brooklyn Dodgers fan. Um, I remember him coming to shows with us and opening cards with myself and my brother,
Yeah.
and being involved in that aspect and getting really kind of crazy into it, right? Like buying boxes and cards all over the house, setting up at card shows with us, like selling our cards so that we can get money to buy more boxes and buy more packs, and making it kind of almost like a like a family thing. It was something that we always did together. So yeah, I mean, there's some core memories there. My dad's no longer with us, but I carry it forward. My son is 10 years old, and I open something with him every Friday.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I mean, you and I have kind of the same path. It was the same thing growing up in the 80s, that 86, 87 top set. That was my first set that I remember putting in the binders and trying to
Yep.
complete the whole set and going through them with my dad, putting them the good ones in the top loaders, putting the Dwight Goodins. And I know you're a Yankees guy, but
Yep.
we were Mets fans growing up. But
Everybody in New York was. I mean,
yeah,
the '86 Mets. It was hard not to be, right?
6 months, right? I mean, but yeah, that was some of the memories that I went through as well. I have 3 daughters now, so it's harder for me to get them involved in sports cars. My daughter does like it when she sees the kind of the fancier ones, and she's very into the prisms and all that stuff, but she does mostly Pokemon, which I'm not into. But it is fun to try and pass along those traditions, right? I mean, going to card shows with my kid was a great experience for me as well. She loves going to, some of the local shows. Do you take your son to some of the shows as well? Does he
Yep,
enjoy
he
them?
goes, he buys cards, he sells cards, he gives me cards to grade with PSA. I take
Wow.
money from him to pay for the PSA, cards. He saves up his money. He's out there wheeling and dealing and selling cards to dealers, and it's fun.
Yeah.
It's a double-edged sword, right? Because you want him to be 10 and not doing this crazy stuff, but I think he's learning some interesting life lessons on this as well. He brings cards to give to younger kids, which is funny to watch a 10-year-old find the 6-year-old at the show and say, "Here you go, you could have this card." So that I'm proud with that. I also have a daughter; she's 14. So I don't know how old your daughters are, but yes, trying to get my daughter into cards was something I did not want to give up on. I
Right.
tried everything from
Yeah.
garbage pail kids to, hey, do just the regular same sports cards, which you shouldn't not try that. Sketch cards. The one thing that I found that sort of stuck, and maybe you'll see this also, is when she got involved or started to enjoy a television show or a movie, cards about that, like Stranger Things was huge. Stranger Things cards was fun. She would open up a box
That's
of Stranger Things,
a
like, I
good
know these
idea.
people,
Yeah.
like I know these characters, and there's a cartoon she watches on Amazon that has cards that came out this year. I'm
Yeah.
buying those cards, and she's trying to build a set of those and things. It's cool. And Disney, we're Disney fans. Lorcana came out. She's got some Lorcana cards up on her wall in her room. You still daughter, son, doesn't matter. Got to get him involved, make it a family thing. So
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of card shows, um, do you go to a lot of card shows? I know you're very familiar with a lot of the, quote unquote influencers and stuff like that. But do you go to a lot of card shows? And when you do go there, is it mostly for networking or mostly for building up your collection, buying and
I'd
selling?
love to go to more. I
Okay.
will start off with that, right? I mean, life is an interesting thing. You have 3 daughters, so you're never gonna have any money.
Yeah, I'm broke.
Unless you gotta hit the lottery, man. You're never gonna have money. You're never gonna have enough time in a bathroom, and you're always gonna need a good plumber for all the hair in the drain. I
Oh
don't
man.
envy your life, man. So,
We're twins, man. I swear we were separated at birth, man.
but it's an
That's
interesting thing, right? But I would love to go to more cards. I go for all of it, right? And it's changed. I will tell you that before doing the podcast stuff and you name it, I would go to like almost every local show that we had here.
yeah,
It was going to buy cards. It was going to to see what people had. It was going to get blasters, and open them up when they were still $20, $25, and they're coming back down to that now, but you don't get anything in them. And I go now for the cards. I go now with my son to to buy cards, sell cards. He brings cards with him. He wants to buy a box for $200. He knows he's got to sell $200 worth of his cards to buy that box and open it and bring it home. If he doesn't, he's not getting that box. So there's a fun little kind of life lesson, business, you name it, that's getting
Sure.
learned there. But I mean, I can't lie to you. Obviously, I love going to shows that I otherwise wouldn't have gone to. I went to Chantilly show, which was awesome. I flew down there and got to interview Don Mattingly. Got to interview people that I collected, Turtle Davis and Michael Vick, and did like podcast interviews with these guys and got to meet athletes like crazy. That's awesome, and that's a different side of it. I've gone to the Philly show a number of times, and my son got to meet Tyrese Maxey, and was opening cards with Devontae Smith and Tobias Harris, and
So cool.
some of the Sixers, and you know got to meet a bunch of those guys. And that's a real cool thing. Chuck Liddell, he gets
Yeah.
autographs from these guys. He gets signed. We went to the show in White Plains, in Westchester, in New York. And I bought a ticket and paid for it and the whole deal, but we got to meet Sean Kemp, and my son was wearing a
He
Sean
was one of
Kemp
my
jersey.
favorites. He was
He
one
was,
of my
he had a Sean
favorites
Kemp
growing
jersey
up.
on. Kemp signed it. He was wearing the signed jersey. People were
That's
like, oh, you want to? He's like, that's cool. I'll wear it. I mean, I'm not buying it to sell it down the road. I don't care if it gets
right.
smudged. It's just a cool experience. The high five, take a picture, and do that. So it's a mix of all those things. I mean, I love to look at the cards. I love to buy cards. What I have found about most shows, at least for me, is if you are engaged in the hobby enough and you see kind of what auction houses are selling things for, and you see what things go for on eBay, the whole deal. Shows are not always the best place for me to buy my cards. Like, I'm a 33 Gaudy, collector. I like buying, vintage baseball cards. And the people who have those at the show, they're getting more than it sells for on
Yeah.
eBay or more than it sells for at an auction. Modern stuff, if you have, a quarterback that might have fallen out of favor and you want to buy him and take a gamble, you might find a
That
dealer,
stuff is a
a
little bit more
younger
liquid.
dealer.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you find someone at the show who might want to just move on from it, and you can get it at a good price.
Right.
If you're into that stuff, shows are great.
Yeah. So speaking of shows, I'm going to be going to my first national this year. I've never gone, but
Nice.
I'm setting up to not setting up, but I'm making plans to head out to the national this year. For people who have never been to the national before, what is some advice that you would give for a first timer going to the national?
All right, I've been to a bunch. I've never been to Cleveland.
Okay.
So the Cleveland one comes with its own little interesting thing. Both Atlantic City and Rosemont in Chicago, the last bunch of years worth of nationals, the hotels are all walkable. I mean, you might not want to walk in Atlantic City, but they're all walkable to the national pretty much, which brings with it a very different type of atmosphere.
Mhm.
Everybody's kind of together, and even if you're not staying in the same hotel, the hotels are all like walkable. So if there's a trade night going on in one, you just walk over to the hotel. A lot of networking, a lot of like dinners, a lot of interesting stuff that went on because of the hotels. Cleveland's not like that.
Right.
When you're staying in Cleveland, your hotels, the town, the Airbnbs, they're all going to be like, you have to drive,
Spaced out a little bit more. Yeah.
rental car, that kind of stuff. So, that alone is something that, a lot of people have to pay attention to. It'll bring a different vibe to the national. The convention center itself in Cleveland is huge.
Mhm.
There's going to be a ton of folks there, a ton of people set up. It's going to be set up really well. The biggest thing that I would say, and this is going to sound really terrible, is no going in, you might not see everything. It's likely that you won't. Right? I mean, it's very difficult to give the national the time that it needs and the time that it deserves. Every time I've gone, and I've gone the last bunch of years, I'll get a message from someone who I didn't see, and they're like, "Whoa, how come you didn't stop by?" And I'm like, "Well, where were you? I
Yeah.
swear I was near the table. Like, I didn't see you." And you're like, "No, I was here next to this guy." And I'm like, "Well, I talked to that guy. How the hell did I not see you at your table?" And it's because I made a left instead of a right, and I never got to that corner. I never got to see that table. There's just so much stuff going on. Um, you know, I, I'm hopeful that maybe you have a plan going in, and it's like, all right, I'm gonna make sure I hit this table, that table, or I want to see this stuff. That would be number one, kind of like going with expectations that it's very hard to hit it all, right? It's like going to Disney World your first time and trying to say, I'm going to ride every ride this day. It's just,
Yeah.
you might not be able to do it, right?
Right.
Second, and people might be surprised by this, make sure you set some time to go to the corporate area. Oh, boo, corporations, they're the worst. But within those corporate areas, you have the auction houses that are going to have some things on display that you will never, ever see. Like the Mickey Mantle 52, and that was an SGC 9 that sold for $12 million, was at the National on display. You could go up and look at it. You can go see it. People have these uniforms and photographs and cards. I mean, there are millions upon millions of dollars on display
Yeah.
in these small little auction house booths, and they all every year try to up their game of what they're bringing, what they're doing, you name it. So that's one. On the other side, there's a lot of fun that goes on there with some of these newer businesses as well. The live shopping guys are always looking to kind of, one up each other. There's almost like a carnival type atmosphere that goes on the other end, So you got the museum end, which is quiet and, let me look at the cool cards. And the other side, it's sort of like have some fun, win some prizes, have a giveaway. And there's a ton of that goes on too. So make sure you budget some time for all that and mix in some looking at regular tables and buying some cards too, right? So
Yeah.
there's, it's a lot of fun. Just like there's no wrong way to do the hobby, there's no wrong way to do the national. You'll have
Right.
a blast.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be definitely an experience and a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of the people that I've been connecting with over the last couple of years through, social media and Instagram. I feel like I know these people, but we've never actually met in person. So that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to the most is, kind of meeting all of these people that I follow, that I follow their content, that have reached out to me, that I've done interviews with. That's something, the networking aspect of this hobby is something that I really enjoy the most is meeting the new people that are, new collectors or people that have been doing it for a long time. There's always something to learn about the hobby from anybody that you meet. What are some of the things that you've learned along the way that you can maybe pass along to someone who's just getting into this hobby? What is some advice that you would give to some of those people?
Folks who are getting in collecting,
Yeah.
folks who are
Well,
getting
either into
in
collecting that are or that have been
content
collecting
making.
and
I mean,
maybe people that have been collecting and are looking to get into creating some content, doing some podcasting, doing some Instagram content, reels, things like that. What are some
okay.
advice that you would give to some of those people?
For the content folks, two quick pieces. Number one, don't do it unless you really think it has some value.
Mhm.
Right? And that's like the biggest one that I could give, right? I mean, I've gone from doing daily episodes to, doing a couple a week plus, your news and your whole deal, not doing it with Andrew anymore and just doing them kind of solo. And I don't record every day because every day I might not have something to put out there that I'm like, all right, well, people are going to find value in this, right? Um, and I think that's a mistake that a lot of people make. It's like, all right, well, I promised I was going to do an episode and I'm going to put it out there every Thursday and every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And you just hop on and you go through the motions. If it's not something that people are going to, you have to be mindful. Someone is going to dedicate their 15, 20, half hour, whatever, you're putting out there, and they're going to dedicate that time to you. Don't waste their time.
Mhm.
Right. And the quickest way to lose people is you're wasting time by, putting stuff out there that, they really are not finding any value to. So that's number one.
Yeah.
It's an easy criticism. And it's not something that I say, like I'm looking down at you, like, don't do it. It's not value. It's from someone who has gone through this. And it's like every day, we're gonna put something out every day and having that conversation. Well, what are we putting out there? Don't worry about it. I got it. It's easier for me because I started collecting literally like 40 years ago. So
We're
so
old, man.
I
We're
can,
getting old, man.
I can talk probably about the hobby for the next 4 years straight
I'm
without taking
sure.
a
Yeah.
break. Just give me some soda and let me go. But not everybody has that same thing, and you run out of the stuff to talk about pretty quickly. So just make sure that when you are spending your own time, don't waste your time and don't waste anybody else's time. The second thing, and this might be the more important one, the one that people are actually going to want to hear, after I told them that you're putting out content that's got no value, is this: just do your damn thing.
Mm.
Right? Do your thing. And know that it's not going to resonate with everyone. Know that it's not going to hit right with everyone. Know that you're probably gonna rub some people the wrong way. Know that, as many love DMs you're gonna get hate ones too. And also know that if you're getting hate from somebody, you're probably doing something right. But most importantly, do it because it's something that you love doing, right? And if not, then go find something to talk about that you do love doing, or go find something to do in the hobby that you do love, right? Maybe you want to be a breaker instead of a podcaster because you enjoy ripping product, and that's a better way of making money. Maybe you want to, open a store or do something else. The content side maybe is not, but if it's what you want to do,
Right.
Go right ahead and do it. Just
That's
make sure it's
great.
something you enjoy doing, you
That's
know?
great advice because if you're doing what you love to do, people will find you that want to be in that niche, that are in that niche, right? I mean, your content isn't going to be for everybody, but if you're constantly trying to put stuff out there that you're keeping up with these influencers or keeping up with people that are, posting the national treasures cards, like that's not for everybody, right? I mean,
Yep.
if you want to post a 1987 Mark McGuire card and tell the story of how you got it, there's a lot of people that are going to find that interesting, that are going to connect with that, right? Like you said, it's not everything is not for everybody. So finding your niche, I completely agree, is where you're going to be happy with your content. And when you're happy with the content that you're putting out there, it's genuine, it's authentic, and that's what people gravitate towards:
That's right.
genuine, authentic content, right?
You can only fake it for so long too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's great if you spend some time looking over this works. Well,
Mhm.
it may work, but it's gonna work for a couple minutes. It's gonna work for a couple episodes. It's gonna work for a couple weeks until you realize it's just not you. And before you realize it's not you, the people who are listening and watching and realize it's not you too. And it's not a recipe for success. So the better way to do it, I think, is just do you. Put your true stuff out there, how you really feel, what you really collect, and the people who want to hear more about that. That's the community you're gonna build.
Yeah. So speaking of collecting, I know
Shoot.
you said you've been collecting for a long time.
Mhm.
What is some of the items in your PC that are the most special to you? It doesn't have to be the most valuable, but some of the things that you've had over the time, or maybe just recent pickups that you say are never leaving my collection, no matter how much fun it is.
Sure. So there are a couple of cards that'll never leave my collection. I have a 1989 Upper Deck Jerome Walton card. Now I started saying that, and you were thinking I was going to say Ken Griffey Jr. And I do. I have a PSA 10 Griffey Jr. The Jerome Walton is not graded. I'm not going to waste my money grading it, but it's a constant reminder of something that needs to be learned by the folks in the hobby today, right? It's chasing the prospects, chasing the fun stuff. And in 1989, the American League, there was a pitcher from Baltimore who won the American League Rookie of the Year. But in the National League, the Chicago Cubs had two young stars. Dwight Smith came in second, and Jerome Walton came in first in the Rookie of the Year ballot. I remember it. And the reason why I remember it is because Griffey had a card in 89 Upper Deck, and then Jerome Walton and Dwight Smith had cards in 89 Upper Deck too. And when Jerome Walton won the Rookie of the Year, I traded all my Ken Griffey Jr. cards, who was injured that year and didn't win the Rookie of the Year,
Yeah,
for Jerome Walton because he was the hot guy. He was going to
yeah.
be the thing. And I kept one Jerome Walton, and it's a constant reminder. So that's a fun one, right? It's a quick story. It's something to giggle about, but it really is a great segue into the current state of affairs, right? Don't trade your Joe Montanas for your Justin Fields just yet. Is kind of where we're going. Or if you have the conviction on Trevor Lawrence, or you have the conviction on one of these other guys, don't trade him for the guy who might win tomorrow, one game, you name it. So it's a fun reminder to me of how fickle the hobby is, how things change on a daily basis. And it also is a reminder to me that my collecting style is I buy goats when they're already goats. I try not to prospect. And when I do prospect, man, I usually wind up going down a rabbit hole that I don't enjoy going down, because it's just for some people that is the thrill. For some people that's what they love. Like they love being first, they love calling the right one, picking the right rookie. There is a whole segment of collectors who all they buy are Bowman prospects, and they rip Bowman like crazy, Bowman baseball, to get in on somebody who they're first on, and they buy cheap. If that's your thing, please keep doing that. The hobby needs you just as much as it needs somebody who's just buying Babe Ruth cards. So there's that. With the Babe Ruth cards, I also own two 33 Gaudy cards that I bought with my first paycheck after I got out of law school and started working as a lawyer. I have a 33 Gaudy Babe Ruth, the worst one of the four. It's the green one, number 181. And I have a
Still Babe
Gehrig
Ruth.
92. And I bought the Ruth in a 4, and I bought the Gehrig in a 5. I still own both of them. The Ruth is in such an old slab. I've owned them for more than 20 years, both cards. The Gehrig was in an even worse slab, but I had it reslabbed at the National this past year. Got it, reserted, and now it's got a new Lighthouse label on the PSA slab. But those, I bought for like $300 and like $700, and they're like worth way more than that now. And that is the other hobby reminder for me. Don't trade your Griffeys for your Jerome Waltons, but at the same time, just like Warren Buffett says, right? Time is your friend, right? Let money make money over time, and buy the right stuff, hold the stuff, and let compounding interest kind of do its thing. That is what I get from my Gaudi, Ruth, and Gehrig. I got a job, I had some money, and I was able to buy cards that I never would have bought as a kid, never could have bought as a kid. I bought them, I hold them, and I don't really look at how much they're worth or the fluctuations over time or the fact that they're worth so much more now than they were when I bought them, because I plan on giving those to my son, and maybe he passes them to his son or daughter, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Is that, I mean, I'm the same way. I collect, legendary guys, Hall of Famers, guys that are already established. I mean, because a lot of them, 90% of the time, you can get those guys for a heck of a lot cheaper than you can get these prospects. The prospecting is a scary business to get into, especially if you're not financially fluid and have a lot of money to just at your expense. Like that, it can be very dangerous for a lot of people getting into that field and trying to flip cards and investing in guys before they're established. People have lost a lot of money doing that. I mean, just look at some of the cards that were, $400,000 five, 3 years ago. Now they're at, like, you can get them for like 10 grand or 5 grand or whatever.
Correct.
Cards will go through fluctuation. So you have to be really careful with who you're investing in. Make sure you have that money and you're not afraid if you do lose it, it's not going to put you in the poorhouse, right? I mean,
It's
that's
true.
a scary thing sometimes. But usually when I buy, prospects or things like that, I'm behind the times on them. I'll pay the extra. I'm not spending, $20,000 on the card.
Yeah.
That's how much my car is. But I'm not gonna drop that much money. But when I do invest in somebody, it's like an Otani. I'll buy a rookie card like a couple years from now, because it's not gonna skyrocket, before he retires and he's in the Hall of Fame. That's when it's probably going to be, a solid investment at that point, because there's you never know what's going to happen with these guys. You never know. He could have Tommy John surgery. He could, blow his
He may
elbow
never
out.
pitch again.
He might never pitch again. I mean, so it's a scary thing. But do you pick up some of those cards? I mean, do you just stick with goats and legends, or do you kind of dabble a little bit in some of these newer guys or prospects at all?
100%. All of it, right? So I try to steer, to my own stuff and keep my own stuff. But especially with a son, and we rip all the time. I have Otani cards, but every Otani card I have is something we pulled out of a box, a pack, you name it, and graded ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? It's not something that I chased because wow, let me go out and get one of these. I wish I did. I guess maybe when he was hurt last time, because the stuff has kind of gone up. Um, it's funny, they're all lessons you learn coming back into the hobby, and the lessons and the stories they change over time. I see a clock countdown. I don't know if you want to go into the next one, but I could probably do the story in the amount of time we have.
Let's do it.
I
Yep.
remember coming back in. Golden auctions wasn't huge yet. It was one of the thinner books that I used to get in the mail telling me what was out there. And I mean, as a Yankee fan, I knew Aaron Judge was like going to be like the big thing, and he came up in 17, and everything was great. And I think the auction was probably the end of 18, maybe early 19. And I was looking at two cards in this auction. All right, looking at two cards. It was LeBron James 2003 Chrome X Fractor in PSA 10. Right, so I mean, a monstrous card, right? Um, I forget how many of them there were in PSA 10, but single digits. And the other side, the other card I was looking at was Aaron Judge. It was his Heritage Real One Red Ink Auto in a 10-10, right? So it was 10 card, 10 auto. And I'm like, I like these cards, right? I'm going to bid on both of these cards. And I was the leading bidder when time ended on both of them. And I said, you know what? I don't have the money to buy both of these. I probably didn't, probably should have. At that time, I should have bought everything, right?
Sure.
But I'm like, Yankees Judge, he's going to be awesome. He's going to be great. And I went with the Judge. And the Judge, I think it sold for like $4,000, and the LeBron was like six. But they were both in the same kind of window, and yeah. So 2 years later, the Chrome refractor at its peak, not the X Fractor, the unnumbered Chrome refractor was selling for nearly $250,000. So I can only imagine at its peak what the X Fractor would
Oh
have
my
done.
God.
And the Judge was like, 2,500
Yeah, I was gonna
instead of
say
four
like around
grand because
two,
he got
3 grand.
hurt
Yeah.
and he hadn't done his monster, home run record breaking season. That
Yeah.
card, that Judge is probably still what it is. Now, I told that story, 2 years ago, in the crazy run, and I'm like, I could have had that card. That card's still probably worth a pretty penny, because I think the refractor PSA 10s are like 25, 30 now. They're not $250,000, but a lot of fun. But it's funny because you kind of like learn a lot of lessons.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't have chased Judge. We're talking about LeBron,
Yeah.
15 years into his career already, with all the rings and the championships and the GOAT conversation. On balance, even though I'm a Yankee fan, even though Judge was this young guy who was
With
going to
your
do great
heart
things,
instead of your head, man.
yeah,
It's like,
I'm like, all right, prospect. I'm going to be early on Judge. I've seen him play. Like, this is the card. It's the right one. So it wasn't the right one. It was the real one, but it wasn't the right one. And it was definitely the wrong call. And you kind of learn from that. Now, I get jaded and talk about buying goats, and a lot of people are like, oh, you're going to miss out. Okay, maybe.
yeah.
But I've learned from my experience what my risk tolerance is and where I want to go. And, that's
Yeah, the
that's
hobby
my story.
regrets, you always look back on them. There's something like that in everything. I mean, I should have invested in Amazon 20 years ago. I mean, like,
Correct.
there's something like that in every niche and everything like
Listen,
that.
I used to own 3,000 shares of Nvidia when it was $60 a share.
Oh my God, my
It
dad
went to
was just telling
90
me about
bucks on
that. You
earnings, and I
sold.
sold it and thought I was a genius. I was
Yep.
like, I just made 50% in like a week. I wish I would have died during that week. My family would be set for
They'd be
life.
good. They'd be good to go, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
All right. Well, we are out of time, but I want to thank Cage Lawyer for hopping on here for a few minutes. Cage, thank you so much for taking the time to be on with me today.
Listen, man, thanks for having me on. For anybody else who wants me on, you never know. Oh, this was a request from yesterday. So just send me a message. If we can make it work, we'll make it work. It was fun, man. Enjoy navigating the hobby. I'll look for you at your first national in Cleveland. Everybody just, tap him on the shoulder and say hi. You're watching his content, you're seeing these videos, just say hi. I'm sure he's gonna love it. I love it when people do that to me. Where you can find me on YouTube is The Hobby with Cage, and we can find me on Instagram. I have The Hobby with Cage, where I post my news on there, but also just my personal is Cage Lawyer on Instagram. And send me a DM. I respond to all of them. Thanks for
Excellent.
having me on.
Thank you again, man. Appreciate it. And thank you so much, folks, for watching another episode of Sports Talk Spotlight. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you.